On June 7, 1981, I left Portland, Oregon with a group of people from the West Coast to ride across the United States. After only 3 days, Michael, here in white, and I split from the group. We picked up Brendan in Gillette, Wyoming. He was abandoned by the group after getting sick. By Pierce, South Dakota, Mike and I could no longer put up with one another. He rode on by himself. Brendan and I continued riding across the United States and talked about going to Europe and continuing, but never did. Then in early 2011, I announced to my family that I wanted to go to Ireland and continue riding. My daughter Tessa said, "Why don't I go with you, Dad?" And Eurotour 2012 was born. We and the bikes are checked in and ready to fly to Shannon, County Clare, Ireland. Before we started to ride, we took 2 days off to get over the jet lag, see some sights, and put our bikes together. After renting a car, our first stop was in the town of Venice. Then we headed toward the cliffs of Moher. The cliffs are over 700 feet high in some places. Getting ready for Eurotour 2012 involved purchasing touring bikes and panniers and other accessories and getting them to the start in Shannon, Ireland. I wanted to ride from Shannon, pass through Como, Italy, where there's a shrine to cycling, and finish at my ancestral homeland in Sicily. I planned to ride across Ireland, Wales, and England, then ferry over to Bruges, Belgium. From Bruges, we'd continue heading southeast across Belgium, Luxembourg, parts of France and Germany, into Basel, Switzerland. We would ride over the Alps to Como, where we would decide to extend the trip to Slovenia and Croatia, or ride straight down through Italy to Sicily. Then we would figure out how to get back to Rome and fly home with the bikes. It seems to me that Ireland grabs a piece of your heart and never gives it back. Not far from the cliffs of Moher, we discovered the slate shoreline along the northern coast of Ireland. At the Victoria Cross Bike Shop in Cork, John refused to charge us for making some necessary modifications to Tessa's bike. We stopped at the Titanic's last port of call in Cobb. 2012 was the 100th anniversary of the ill-fated voyage. June 27th, 2012, ready to roll off in Shannon, Ireland. It was the first time Tessa had ever toured. If you're coming with us, you've got to be tough. The first rest stop.
You're a bicycle tourist, Tessa.
Most of the time we managed to avoid the occasional Irish rain. Our first lunch stop was in Tipperary, and our first wrong turn. Our first night's sleep was at a hostel in Cashel, County Tipperary, where the rooms are named for authors. Ours was Oscar Wilde. I had a delicious grass-fed lamb shank for dinner. We watched a Eurocup soccer semi-final at this pub. The typical Irish breakfast, protein and fat rich, carb poor, a problem for me. They call that black stuff pudding. The ruins of the Hoare Abbey, built around 1272. Henri, a Frenchman who worked at the hostel, suggested that we walk to the abbey ruins in the morning. Tessa gets directions from the hostel lady. We didn't want to get lost again. Get lost again, haha. That's funny. Little did we know what was coming up in the next couple of weeks. We stopped to rest in a churchyard in Killinall. That's where we met Michael O'Donnell, a local farmer. As a young boy, he heard stories about the Vietnam War on the news. He became intrigued with the country and recently took a vacation there with his wife. Ducking out of the rain, we met Paul. Every few weeks he has coffee and waits for his wife Bernie. She's across the street at Curl Up and Die, having her hair done. So we joined them for a cup until Bernie showed up with her new do. There were few vacancies in Kilcullen, County Kildare. A local man named Kevin suggested that we stay above Barden's pub. The next morning, Tessa's birthday breakfast was next door at On Tierman, a restaurant that provides meaningful jobs for people with disabilities. After 20 years of having Saturday breakfast and working on the crossword puzzle together, Patrick asked the editor to hide a marriage proposal to Jennifer in the crossword puzzle clues. Here they are with their daughter Lily. On our way to Dublin, we came across a festival in the town of Naas. We encountered a few long steep climbs while crossing Ireland. On the way into Dublin, I got my second flat in the first 4 days. Peter asked us if we got on each other's nerves, gave us directions, and sang happy birthday to Tess. At the Egan House Bed and Breakfast in Dublin, we celebrated Tessa's birthday and had FaceTime with Mom and our family. The next day we took a day off to see Dublin. A cab driver said that the €8 million needle was a waste of money. The Dublin Castle has been in continuous occupation since its establishment in 1204 AD. If we looked like we needed help, it was typical for Irish people to offer to help us out before we would even ask. The Guinness Brewery tour was a must on my list. That's where we learned to pour a perfect pint. Goodbye to the Emerald Isle. It poured rain for most of the ferry ride to Wales. We found shelter, lots of Lionel Richie music, and great Caribbean food at Dee's Deli in Holyhead. Here are Dee and her sidekick, Little Paul. He boasted that he was known as the neighbor from hell and drew a picture of his buddy, Jimmy Pepper, on a good day. We had nasty weather riding into Bangor. At one point, the wind blew Tessa over. This is Shirley at her B&B where we stayed in Bangor. On our climb into Snowdonia Park, we met a local lady, Diana. She said that if we took the back road, it would look like Middle Earth. Charles Darwin felt this was a great place to study evolution. Diana had told us there'd be an ugly hill we'd have to climb. At the top, we met a gentleman who said to be sure to visit Oxford. And we enjoyed peanut butter sandwiches for lunch. I told Tess that at times it would be good to have a formidable appearance. So I demonstrated my favorite touring face for her. I didn't stick around to see if he was friendly. Welsh is one strange language. Warm Showers hosts, Mary and Dermot, live in a 300-year-old rectory in the Welsh countryside. They had ridden across the U.S. 2 years before. On the 4th of July, we took the day off and went to the coastal town of Llandudno with Mary. Later, Dermot and Mary had a 4th of July cookout for us in their gazebo. Dermot had built the gazebo himself. I had planned to stay with them long before we had left home. Dermot is the general practitioner in the local village. My birthday was the next day, and we took a break in Llangollen, where there was a festival going on. The sun was shining and kids were singing popular songs on the street. Tessa bought me an organic ice cream cone. A great Welsh hero, Owain Glyndŵr, fought against British rule in the late 14th century and the early 15th century. We were about to ride into the rainiest first 2 weeks of July England had had in at least 100 years. We bought some cheese at the local market. We stopped to look for bicycling maps at the Wellington Library. We found none, but joined so we could use the computers while it deluged outside. The rain finally stopped. We rode a mile or so to the Grove House Hotel. It had rained as much in a day as it usually rains there in a month. One person was washed away by floodwaters. Steve Harris runs the Grove House with his son and his mother. We had a great dinner there, a nice day, and she made us a wonderful breakfast in the morning. The weather was never kind of nice. When it was nice, it was very, very nice. When it was bad, it was awful. Okay, so I thought they might invite me. Hey, get it moving up there, bud. These young guys never had much to look forward to in life. I guess that's why he's not smiling. In Birmingham, we got lost trying to find the hostel. In Stratford-upon-the-Avon, we visited Shakespeare's boyhood home. In Shakespeare's time, little boys were clothed in dresses to try to fool the devil. Shakespeare married his childhood sweetheart, Anne Hathaway, who lived not far from him. Getting ready for dinner with the bard. Come in, Taylor. Here you may roast your goose. At times we wound up riding in pouring rain. The water was pooling on the road, and I could hardly see. I'd breathe a sigh of relief after lorries would pass me, then worry about seeing something bad happen to Tess, who was ahead of me. The Oxford hostels were full of Olympic athletes, so we stayed at the hotel. Tolkien and Carroll were amongst the famous authors who worked at Oxford. We had lunch the next day in the Queen Victoria Diamond Jubilee gazebo. The Olympic torch was about to pass through town. So we were out of there. Google Maps led Tessa to an interesting old road out of Oxford. We met Allison, who told us we were on the old stage road from Oxford to London, and that many highway robberies had taken place there in the olden days. We rode down into a medieval town. When I asked what this might have been used for, the local kids told me it was a jail, but I believe it was a kiln. In the town of High Wycombe, we stayed at a lovely inn called the Tree at Cadmore End. It had great Indian cuisine. Dave, the owner, was excited when hearing about our trip. A rainy, confusing ride into London. An old hippie-type dude helped us by giving us directions to the hostel near King's Cross. I almost crashed when I hit a wet manhole cover, but I managed to keep the bike upright. At the Royal Library, we visited an exhibit showing original manuscripts of great British writers. I was amazed with how much they had crossed out and rewritten. The manuscripts included works by Carroll, Rowling, Lennon, Dickens, and Oscar Wilde. The hostel we stayed at was called the Clink. It put 6 people in a room the size of most people's closets. But it couldn't be as bad as this place. No, we're not really at the Bates Motel. We're at Madame Trousseau's Wax Museum. Scary, isn't it? One of the greatest rock musicians of all time. Not him, this guy. Here Tessa reminds us how Jimmy used to play the guitar with his teeth. Getting a good picture crossing Abbey Road was almost impossible. The people that lived and worked in the area had the audacity to think they could use the street as they pleased. In our best picture, we were going in the wrong direction. Here's Tessa outside Abbey Road's studio. I wonder if George Martin would want to make any changes to my background music. I can hear him now. Hey Ringo, more cowbell. Ready for the changing of the guard. The Olympic beach volleyball venue was at Buckingham Palace. All across Europe, Tess and I made it a practice to go into churches and check out the artwork. So we were disappointed the Westminster Abbey was closed. Here's Tessa taking off from King's Cross Station to visit Hogwarts. After 2 days off in London, we were back on the road. We passed a new building that they call the Shard. It started out as a very nice day. The Tower Bridge. After a very good lunch at Wagamama's, we were very happy. We would have liked to have time to tour the Tower of London, but we had to get going. So off across the Thames River we went on the Tower Bridge. We got lost and rode through more rain to the town of Chatham. This is our Warm Showers host, Simon Williams, his wife Susie, and their lovely daughter Katie. The boyhood home of Charles Dickens is not far. Simon suggested buying the TomTom navigation app, which would reduce our getting lost the rest of the trip. We tried to wait out the rain the next day, but it didn't stop. We finally rolled off late that afternoon. Simon predicted that we would have better weather, kinder drivers, and more support after we crossed the English Channel. We had a hard rainy ride to Dover and didn't arrive until well after dark. For a time, I thought we wouldn't make it. We stayed at the hostel in Dover and caught the ferry to Calais the next morning. While waiting for the ferry, I had a nice conversation with 68-year-old Eddie. He told me that he had always wanted to ride a bicycle across the United States. The original plan was to take a ferry from Ramsgate, England to Ostend, Belgium, but that ferry didn't take bicycles, so we had to take a ferry from Dover over to Calais, France. The white cliffs of Dover are made up of chalk and black flint. I'm looking forward to getting to the mainland and hopefully better weather. I was happy to see people sunning themselves on the beach in Calais. We began to see lots of artwork on the roundabouts. I was glad to be finally riding on the right and going counterclockwise. It was pleasant riding along the canals in the north of Belgium. And it was nice to have the TomTom navigation. Belgium had the best mussels anywhere. We rode into Bruges and more rain. Bruges is a beautiful city no matter what the weather, but my morale was low. I was sick of the rain. Being unable to take the ferry directly to Ostend added 60 miles to the trip. And I messed up staying with a Warm Showers host I had eagerly looked forward to staying with. Riding from Calais to Bruges actually brought us further north. Even the cycling statues were checking to see when it would stop raining. Down the road, this Spanish-speaking lady was selling her little pigs at a street market. We took a lunch break in Ghent, a beautiful city. Tessa bought some Belgian chocolates for her mom and Aunt Karen, who we were going to meet up with in Luxembourg in a few days. We were about a week behind where I wanted to be, so we didn't stay long in Brussels. Dinant is a cute little tourist destination. I wish that all of Belgium was this flat. After Brussels, it became quite hilly. But the weather was finally dry enough to camp. We had had 8 straight days of riding since London, and we were looking forward to getting to Luxembourg to meet up with my wife, Linda, and her sister Karen. Riding into Luxembourg was simply majestic. Karen and Linda were walking down the street when we spotted them. The sun was shining, it was 6 o'clock, and many church bells began ringing as if on cue. I thought about how Jonah might have felt after the whale had spit him out. Karen and Linda had flown to Zurich, rented a car, and had driven to Luxembourg to meet us. Medieval Luxembourg was preserved below street level. A very sad war memorial. The next morning we stored our bikes at the train station and took the train to Paris. The final stage of the Tour de France, I was lucky to get this shot of winner Bradley Wiggins when he was about to pass the Union Jack. From the top of the Eiffel Tower. The next day we took the train to Versailles. The palace was closed that day, so we toured the grounds. It was nice to have that cart. My legs really needed a break. We returned to Luxembourg by train. And with our first vacation over, we rode toward the Rhine Valley the next day. We took a nice break in the churchyard. Linda and Karen were touring castles and wineries while Tessa and I rode. The only overnight in Germany was in Wallerfagen at the lovely Chardonnay Inn. I was very bonked when I got there. I think it was from not enough sleep in Paris. But I felt well rested and ready to ride the next day. When I asked this German how to turn off the soap, he took the wand, sprayed Tessa's chain and gears, and washed out most of the lubricant. Each evening we would meet up with Linda and Karen and go to castles and wineries. The local town had built this restaurant within the walls of the fortress. We would have fancy dinners. Life on the road was much better than before Karen and Linda had shown up. Our waitress was a funny lady who spoke only French. Here are some hops. There were flowers almost everywhere. A very interesting church in Strasbourg. The interior was intriguing and beautiful. The night before we had flown to Europe, we had seen the movie Brave, so I asked Tessa to pose beside the French poster for the film. Sharing the road. Round and square bales in the same field. The TomTom put us on some neat routes. More artwork on a roundabout. The fortress Hut Kronensberg sits at 755 meters above the valley. It was an inspiration for Disney's Sleeping Beauty Castle. It was built in the 12th century in what was then Germany, but Germany lost this area to France in World War I. Notice how the trees are grown into the wall. On our winery tour, some things you never forget, like this ham hock, sauerkraut, and potato. Oh my, was that delicious. This place was named for Louis XIV, the Sun King. When we stayed someplace really nice, it was hard to roll off the next day. I think Tessa wanted to go with Linda and Karen. Just after crossing the Rhine, we came upon 3 women picking flowers. Though she spoke no English and we no German, we had a nice conversation with this lovely lady. The lady holding the flowers said a blessing for our safety. Here we are crossing into Basel, Switzerland. The plan was to store our bikes in Basel and go to Zermatt in the rental car.